lesson as what to produce is basically the problem of selection of commodities and their quantities to be produced. There is a limited resource, and producers cannot produce all the goods that are demanded in the economy. So every economy has this problem, that what to produce and in what quantities, which means that every economy decides what are the kinds of goods to be produced and how much of that should be produced. If, for example, an economy has to decide between the production of apples and oranges, and the economy has a limited amount of resources, the resources required to produce apple and oranges is land, and let's say an economy only has a certain amount of land. So how much of the land should be used for growing apples and how much of the land should be used for growing oranges? Because if you grow more oranges, you will have less number of apples, and if you grow more of apples, you will have less of oranges. So therefore, whenever you are thinking about producing more of one item, you will have to remember that you are consciously also knowing that less of the other quantities are getting produced. So therefore, if there are economies that thinks that national defense should be more important, then they will lose out on hospitals and other basic public utilities. Or if an economy decides that right now all our public utilities are very important, they might want to build a lot of hospitals, they might want to build roads, and if they reduce the amount of spending in national defense, then definitely because of the production of more of public utilities, the amount of defense utilities have got reduced. So this is also a problem of choice. So what we mean to say is that land, labor, capital, machines, tools, equipments, and natural means are limited. Every demand of every individual in the economy cannot be satisfied, so the society has to decide what commodities are to be produced and to what extent. And the goods produced in the economy can be classified as consumer goods and producer goods. These goods can be further classified as a single-use goods and durable goods. So whenever you are thinking about producing more of consumer goods, the number of producer goods may reduce. Whenever you want to produce more of single-use goods, then more use of durable goods might get reduced. It is undoubtedly the basic problem of an economy. If you produce more of one commodity, it will mean that we are neglecting the production of another commodity. In this, we are assuming that all the factors of production in the economy are fully utilized or absorbed. So if we want to increase the production of one commodity, we will have to withdraw the resources from the production of another commodity. On the basis of our requirements, goods can further be classified as goods for necessities, comforts, and luxuries. The economy is also faced with the problem of how much of the goods are going to be necessary items, how much of them could be luxury items, and how much of them could be items of comfort. So every economy always has a problem of choosing as what type of goods should be produced in an economy, and every time they produce more of one type of goods, another type of goods has to be reduced in production because the resources, because the raw materials required to produce those goods are limited in quantity, and it has to be diverted to the use of another commodity whenever you are producing anything in the economy. The second problem of how to produce refers to the selection of the technique that is to be used for the production of goods and service. The choice of technique mainly depends on the availability of resources, the structure of the economy, and the policies of the government. Now, once in our example, if we decide that this is going to be the menu in the dining hall, we have to decide how that menu has to be made. How many workers are we going to employ in the kitchen to start producing? How many machines are required? So this technique of production, choosing the technique of production or the method of production, is known as the problem of how to produce, or making a decision on how to produce. Now, how to produce? Now, the decision, when you take the decision, your decisions will depend upon, first and foremost, on the availability of resources. Like, for example, if there is a country that has a lot of labor, that has enough manpower, that where the population is very high, definitely that country will use a technique that is very labor intensive. But if there is a country that is very sparsely populated, where getting the labor force is very difficult, so there you might have to use more machines to do the work of the humans, and they might have to use a more labor intensive technique. So the two different techniques that are commonly talked about is known as a labor intensive technique, where there is a greater use of labor. Now, one of the reasons why we use a larger amount of labor could also depend on the kind of product you are making. Like, for example, the tea industry is very labor intensive because machines cannot do the work which the human hands can do, because the tea pickers have to use their hands and know what particular buds to be picked up. For example, the art industry is very labor intensive. You cannot expect machines to come out with an artwork. So definitely the product also tells us whether that product is going to be labor intensive or capital intensive. The capital intensive technique is another way of producing, where we make greater use of machines in the production process. Like, for example, in electronic industry, definitely you will have to use more machines than labor. So it depends on the product, but it also depends on your availability of resources. If a country, like I told you, already has a greater amount of population, they will use a more labor intensive technique, while a country that has more less labor or very sparsely populated will decide on a capital intensive technique of production. The choice of technique mainly depends on the availability of resources, the structure of the economy, and the policies of the government. Thus, it is difficult to tell very clearly without first knowing the conditions in the economy as what technique of production a country might be using. After the decision regarding the goods to be produced is taken, the next problem arises as to what techniques should be adopted to produce the commodity. Goods can be produced in a large-scale industry or in a small-scale village or a cottage industry. The economy also has to decide between an automatic machines and handicrafts. Hence, two main options are either capital-intensive technology or labor-intensive technology. The economy has to decide about the technique of production on the basis of the availability of labor and capital. The next problem for whom to produce is a problem of distribution. Because an economy has very limited resources, they cannot satisfy the wants of all its people. So whatever has been produced, there is a need to decide which people are going to consume the goods that have been produced. The first thing that an economy might want to do is allow the economy to distribute goods according to the people's purchasing power. So if the rich have all the money, should the rich be allowed to consume and get all the goods and services? Or should the economy decide on a more equal distribution of wealth and goods and services? Like the second diagram shows a row of houses which looks almost the same. It means that all the people have almost the same income stature. So should the economy strive towards having an equality in terms of its income distribution, and see that all goods and services are distributed in a more or less equal manner. A third, should more productive people, the people who have been more productive in the economy, who have been able to produce more in the economy, be allowed to take a larger part of the goods and services in the economy? The answer in most of the economies is a combination and a fine balance between all the three. Definitely, most economies allow people to get their goods and services as per their income or the amount of money that they have. But at the same time, governments and societies try to ensure that the economy has an equal distribution of wealth. There is equality in the distribution of wealth. But at the same time, productivity also has to be rewarded, because people who have worked very hard for producing the goods and services should be getting more of the goods and services in the economy. So ultimately, when an economy decides on the distribution of goods and services, they follow a balance of all the three things. That is, basically, they allow the goods and services to be distributed as per the income distribution in the economy. But yet, governments and economies try to see that income distribution is not uneven, that there is no big disparity between the income of the rich and people, and at the same time, people who have worked hard are suitably rewarded. Now, apart from these problems, apart from it, the economy also decides on whether there is efficient or fuller utilization of resources. That means that economies have to decide whether whatever resources that they have are being utilized properly or not. For example, if we look at the example of our school kitchen, the wheat and the sugar that we have bought last year should not be lying idle and should not go for a waste. It should be utilized properly so that the items that we have bought with our money is actually utilized and not going for a waste. The last thing that every economy tries to do is that there is growth and development taking place. Even though there is a system in our school kitchen to see that the resources are utilized fully, that everyone, whoever is wanting different items, we have been able to rank which ones are important and which ones are less important. At the same time, we also expect that year after year some development takes place. The quality of food improves, the quality of service improves. So definitely that is also the same with all the economies. Every economy tries to see that there is development and growth happening year after year in the economy. So this ends our lesson on the different problems and the basic problems of the economy. I would like you to read the notes that have been sent along with this particular presentation. It is given in the form of scanned copies from your textbook. Please read it. If there are queries, please look into the queries and address it with your teacher. Thank you.